Imagine waking up, looking in the mirror, and deciding that today is the day you are going to play a game of chicken with a 100,000-ton floating city packed with enough nuclear-powered devastation to wipe a small country off the map. Sounds like absolute madness, right? Well, strap in, because what I am about to tell you is not a Hollywood script. It is the jaw-dropping, pulse-pounding, highly classified reality of what went down in the pre-dawn darkness of the Strait of Hormuz. 60 Iranian fast attack boats swarmed the USS Abraham Lincoln in a highly coordinated, deadly, serious ambush. No warning, no radio contact. Just 60 heavily armed speedboats flooring the throttle and aiming straight for the undisputed king of the ocean. What unfolded over the next 9 minutes culminated in 94 seconds of violence so fast, so precise, and so overwhelmingly brutal that the Iranian Revolutionary Guard would spend years trying to pick their jaws up off the floor. It was 5:17 in the morning. The sky was still black, the water was practically pitch dark, and the Combat Information Center aboard the USS Abraham Lincoln was humming with the quiet, caffeinated focus of a routine night watch. The Abraham Lincoln wasn't just out for a leisurely cruise, it was transiting the Strait of Hormuz. If you don't know about the Strait of Hormuz, let me paint you a picture. It is a 21-mile-wide choke point that sits right between Oman and Iran. Roughly 20% of the entire planet's petroleum supply has to squeeze through this tiny claustrophobic corridor every single week. It is the absolute geopolitical jugular of the modern world. Every nation that loves having gasoline in its cars knows exactly how vulnerable this stretch of water is, and Iran has spent decades dreaming up ways to turn that geography into a weapon. Their whole philosophy? Speed, swarming, and overwhelming the enemy. But as the crew of the Lincoln was about to demonstrate, there is a massive difference between a textbook theory and the brutal reality of an American layered defense. The radar operator on the Lincoln saw it first. At first glance, it was just a ping. Just a slightly off, weird-looking return on the screen that a tired sailor might brush off as background noise or a cluster of local fishing dhows. The ocean is noisy, and anomalies happen all the time. But this wasn't noise. Less than 40 seconds after that first questionable blip, the tactical display completely exploded. The atmosphere in the combat center shifted from a sleepy routine to an icy, laser-focused intensity. There was absolutely no panic. Panic is for amateurs. What fell over that room was the terrifying, hyper-competent stillness of highly trained killers realizing that the scenario they had simulated 1,000 times was suddenly knocking on their front door. 60 glowing tracks lit up the tactical display. They were accelerating, they were converging, and they were dead set on the carrier strike group. You have to understand, a carrier strike group isn't just one big boat waiting to be hit. It is a sprawling, interconnected, miles-wide web of sensors and weapons. The Lincoln was surrounded by 2 Arleigh Burke-class destroyers and a Cyclone-class patrol craft running interference closer in. When the carrier's radar saw those 60 boats, every single ship in the formation saw them at the exact same millisecond. The math was horrifyingly simple. 60 expendable boats, each packed with armed crews willing to die, all aimed at the most expensive piece of military real estate on Earth. By 5:18 a.m., the swarm was 18 nautical miles out. On paper, it still looked manageable, but the clock was ticking. The tactical action officer had a tiny window of time to start moving the chess pieces. Up on the flight deck, the rotors of the MH-60R Seahawk helicopters were already spinning up, screaming into the salty air. The destroyers woke up their weapon systems, tracking the inbound threat. Somewhere in that digital network, cold calculations were being made about exactly who was going to die first. Then, at 5:19 a.m., the Iranian swarm played its wild card. At 12 miles out, the massive formation of 60 boats violently split into 3 separate attack wings. They peeled away from the main body, angling toward different American ships at the exact same time. It was a textbook, brilliantly executed swarm maneuver designed to snap the defender's attention in half. The goal is to create so many simultaneous crises that the defense simply shorts out. Some of these fast attack craft were visibly bristling with rocket launchers. Others had heavy machine guns mounted on the bows. The lead boats were absolutely tearing across the water, pushing past 70 knots. Their hulls were barely touching the waves, throwing up massive rooster tails of white spray in the dim morning light. The Iranians were just 7 minutes away. To the American sailors, that felt like an eternity, but also nowhere near enough time. But here is the fatal flaw in the Iranian master plan. They looked at the water. They looked at the horizon. They completely forgot to look straight up. At 5:21 a.m., the MH-60R Seahawks had climbed to 1,500 feet, spreading out over the fleet and giving the Americans a godlike overhead view of the entire battlescape. No boat-level radar could ever match this. The helicopter crews stared down at the water and saw the split happening in real time. They instantly fed that crystal-clear picture to every warship below them. With their twin engines howling, M240 door guns locked and loaded, and AGM-114 Hellfire missiles hanging off the pylons, the choppers had the perfect vantage point, but the picture they saw was escalating rapidly. The Iranian formation was getting terrifyingly tight. The lead boats, newer Siraj-class variants packing twin diesel engines, were suddenly pushing speeds that American intelligence hadn't even predicted. The gap was closing way faster than any computer model said it should. And then, at 5:22 a.m., the entire frequency of the ocean changed. It started as a low, distinctive rumble, a sound that is absolutely unmistakable and deeply terrifying to anyone who knows what it means. It was a turbofan roar descending from the heavens, flattening out into a sustained guttural note as the aircraft dropped down toward the wave tops. Enter the A-10 Thunderbolt II, affectionately known as the Warthog. This absolute beast of an aircraft doesn't care about sleek aerodynamics or breaking the sound barrier. It was built around a gun, literally. The entire airplane is just an accessory for the GAU-8 Avenger rotary cannon mounted in its nose. This gun spits out 30mm depleted uranium rounds at an absolutely psychotic 70 rounds per second. When an A-10 locks onto a target and dives, the sound actually arrives before the bullets do. It is a low-frequency, mechanical snarl that the ocean simply has no answer for. At 5:23 a.m., the Warthog let out its signature burp of pure destruction. That first blinding burst caught the lead Iranian boat before it even had a chance to realize what was happening. We are talking about 30mm rounds traveling at nearly a kilometer per second, slamming into fiberglass. It wasn't a sinking. It was an erasure. The boat came apart in a catastrophic, instantaneous sequence. First the bow, then the engine block, and then a massive fireball as the fuel ignited. The explosion lit up the dawn sky for miles. The moment that lead boat evaporated, the sheer shock of it shattered the Iranian swarm. The boats immediately behind the fireball scattered left and right, violently breaking formation out of pure primal panic. And right there, in that split second, the attack was defeated. You see, a swarm attack relies entirely on geometric convergence. They have to hit all at once to overwhelm the target. But the second those boats started avoiding each other instead of charging forward, the coordinated strike devolved into a chaotic mess of isolated targets. And if there is one thing the United States Navy excels at, it is systematically dismantling isolated targets. Seconds later, the A-10 swung around for a second pass, another deafening roar. Bullets stitched across the churning water in a perfectly straight line, ripping straight through two more boats in the blink of an eye. One boat instantly lost all power, coasting to a pathetic stop while vomiting thick black smoke and a massive fuel slick into the water. The other boat cranked its steering hard right and pinned the throttle, desperately trying to flee, but that panicked decision sent it directly into the crosshairs of a hovering Seahawk helicopter. The chopper pilot didn't even hesitate. He squeezed the trigger on the door gun, walking a line of fiery 7.62 tracer rounds right across the water and burying them deep into the fleeing boat's engine block. The vessel wallowed, completely dead in the water. By 5:24 a.m., the bloodbath was accelerating. The Cyclone-class patrol craft sitting pretty on the water had been quietly tracking the runners, the boats that realized they were massively outgunned and tried to turn tail. The Cyclone's Mk-38 Bushmaster chain gun locked on at 2,200 yards, spitting 25mm high-explosive rounds at 200 rounds a minute. The first burst chewed up the water 50 yards behind a fleeing boat. The gunner made a micro-adjustment. The second burst was a direct hit. 2 more Iranian boats were shredded before they could even clear the effective range, their crews desperately diving overboard as bright orange life vests popped against the dark waves. But against all odds, at 5:25 a.m., one absolute madman of an Iranian captain held his course. Through the A-10 fire, through the helicopter tracers, through the exploding debris of his comrades, this one boat kept accelerating. It actually managed to cross the 1,500-yard line. That was a fatal mistake. The moment it crossed that invisible boundary, the Phalanx CIWS mount on the carrier woke up. If you don't know what a CIWS is, imagine a massive white R2-D2 dome strapped with a Gatling gun that fires automatically. It doesn't ask permission. It doesn't wait for a human to pull a trigger. The radar locked. The fire control computer calculated the threat. Inbound, closing, armed.